Hello, welcome to Heavy D Storytelling. I'm David Sneathen, and my ticker is not counting, so I don't know if it's actually recording. Now it's at 8. Okay, so there is a lag. Yes, we're aware of that. Okay, so I think that I've successfully put. I see there's 2 people watching. That's great. Okay, I think that I've put a link to Proverbs in there's no snakes watching according to Rebecca. Okay, so I think that I put a link to Proverbs. So if you click on the link, then you can follow along with me in a digital copy of the English Standard Version of the Bible, Compliments of Bible Hub, which is the digital version that I use. It has like about 20 different English translations. It has the Hebrew and the Greek and different stuff. And I'm losing track of what we're doing. I've been reading Romans all day while I've been sitting at a desk at work, waiting for people to coming in and tally them. And I think we had about a total of 40 people all day coming into my building. So that was wonderful. So in the 6-hour shift. So here we are. It is April the 6th. And we are going to read Proverbs number 6, or chapter 6. My son, if you have put up security for your neighbor, have given your pledge for a stranger, if you are snared in the words of your mouth, caught in the words of your mouth, then do this, my son, and save yourself, for you have come into the hand of your neighbor. Go, hasten, and plead urgently with your neighbor. Give your eyes no sleep and your eyelids no slumber. Save yourself like a gazelle from the hand of the hunter, like a bird from the hand of the fowler. Go to the ant, O sluggard, consider her ways and be wise. Without having any chief, officer, or ruler, she prepares her bread in summer and gathers her food in harvest. How long will you lie there, O sluggard? When will you arise from your sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest, and poverty will come upon you like a robber, and want like an armed man. A worthless person, a wicked man, goes about with crooked speech, winks with his eye, signals with his feet, points with his finger. With perverted heart devises evil, continually sowing discord. Therefore, calamity will come upon him suddenly. In a moment, he will be broken beyond healing. There are 6 things that the Lord hates, 7 that are an abomination to him: haughty eyes, a lying tongue, and hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that devises wicked plans, feet that make haste to run to evil, a false witness who breathes out lies, and one who sows discord among brothers. My son, keep your father's commandments and forsake not your mother's teaching. Bind them on your heart always, tie them around your neck. When you walk, they will lead you. When you lie down, they will watch over you. And when you awake, they will talk to you. For the commandment is a lamp, and the teaching a light, and the reproofs of discipline are the way of life, to preserve you from the evil woman, from the smooth tongue of the adulteress. Do not desire her beauty in your heart, and do not let her capture you with her eyelashes. For the prince of a prostitute is only a loaf of bread, but the price of a prostitute is only a loaf of bread, but a married woman hunts down a precious life. Can a man carry fire next to his chest and his clothes not be burned? Or can one walk on hot coals and his feet not be scorched? So is he who goes in to his neighbor's wife. None who touches her will go unpunished. People do not despise a thief if he steals to satisfy his appetite when he is hungry, but if he is caught, he will pay 7-fold. He will give all the goods of his house. He who commits adultery lacks sense. He who does it destroys himself. He will get wounds and dishonor, and his disgrace will not be wiped away, for jealousy makes a man furious, and he will not spare when he takes revenge. He will not accept no compensation. He will accept no compensation. He will refuse though you multiply gifts. So that is Proverbs chapter 6. Again, this is the English Standard Version of the Bible, and I've placed a link in the description, so you should be able to click on it and read it whenever you want to, or you can follow along. If you are replaying this, you can follow along while I'm reading it. And of course, I stumbled over a couple of the passages. As you notice, I am in my Army uniform, and that is because I just got home about 15 or 20 minutes ago, and I just haven't really had the chance to change clothes yet. So, read Proverbs. The next thing that we have is Kimberly's synopsis of what we read in the last day. And then it looks like JJ is going to join her today. And then we're going to read 2 chapters today, and we are going to cut it short because I haven't had dinner yet. So I hope that everybody enjoys today's story from Prince Caspian. I have put the titles below in the description, and I will put the time that I begin each of those also in the description. And I did notice the other day that if you click on that time, it will take you directly to it. So you don't have to listen to all of my rambling and, you know, whatever is going on in the room. You can just listen to the story. So without further ado, here is Kimberly ready to give you her synopsis.
Okay, so yesterday, Peter, Edmund, Susan, and Lucy, and the dwarf, I keep forgetting his name, Trumpkin, the dwarf Trumpkin, they sailed on the boat, and they went over, like, no. What happened was they took an alternate route than what the dwarf had taken, and they got lost because apparently it changed, which is highly likely actually, because it was at least 1,000 years or so. And JJ, please, you're distracting me. And so they reached this gorge that looks like the river called the Rush. Or at least it was the Rush back in Peter's day. And Lucy, she thinks she sees Aslan, but no one else sees him. And so they took a vote on whether to follow Aslan or follow Peter, and they followed Peter down instead of up. Then you voted for what? Hey, JJ, chill. It was Edmund who voted for up and Lucy for up. Trumpkin for down, and Susan for down, and Peter for down. And so then they go down, and they find this big fir tree forest that's impossible for them to cross, so they have to go around it. So then they are almost there, but there's a settlement of humans that is in between them and the stone table, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. So they're not able to make it to the stone table, so they backtrack all the way back to the fir woods, where Lucy, that night, sees Aslan again, and the trees are dancing. So then she talks with Aslan. Aslan tells her to wake up everybody, and she tried Peter. He was like, okay, that's great, and then he went back to bed. Susan, it must have been a dream. Then Edmund, you saw Aslan? Where? I can't see him. Then Lucy, sorry, Lucy, she says, he said that you might not. And then he says, okay, well, we gotta wake up the others. And then that's where we are.
That's where we are. Okay. So, as Kimberly said, that's where we are. So, chapter 11, the lion roars. When the whole party was finally awake, Lucy had to tell her story for the fourth time. The blank silence which followed it was as discouraging as anything could be. I can't see anything, said Peter after he had stared, his eyes sore. Can you, Susan? No, of course I can't, snapped Susan, because there isn't anything to see. She's been dreaming. Do lie down and go to sleep, Lucy. And I do hope, said Lucy in a tremulous voice, that you will all come with me because I'll have to go with him whether anyone else does or not. Don't talk nonsense, Lucy, said Susan. Of course you can't go off on your own. Don't let her, Peter. She's being downright naughty. I'll go with her if she must go, said Edmund. She's been right before. I know she has, said Peter, and she may have been right this morning. We certainly have no luck going down the gorge. Still, at this hour of the night, and why should Aslan be invisible to us? He never used to be. It's not like him. What does the DLF say? Oh, I say nothing at all, answered the dwarf. If you all go, of course, I'll go with you. And if your party splits up, I'll go with the High King. That's my duty to him and King Caspian. But if you ask my private opinion, I'm a plain dwarf who doesn't think there's much chance of finding a road by night where you can't find one by day. And I have no use for magic lions, which are talking lions and don't talk, and friendly lions, though they don't do us any good, and whopping big lions, though nobody can see them. It's all bilge and beanstalks as far as I can see. He's beating his paw on the ground for us to hurry, said Lucy. We must go now. At least I must. You've no right to try to force the rest of us like that. It's 4-1, and you're the youngest, said Susan. Oh, come on, growled Edmund. We've got to go. There'll be no peace till we do. He fully intended to back Lucy up, but he was annoyed at losing his night's sleep and was making up for it by doing everything as sulkily as possible. On the march, then, said Peter, warily fitting his arm into his shield strap and putting his helmet on. At any other time, he would have said something nice to Lucy, who was his favorite sister, for he knew how wretched she must be feeling, and he knew that whatever had happened, it was not her fault. But he couldn't help being a little annoyed with her all the same. Susan was the worst. Supposing I started behaving like Lucy, she said, I might threaten to stay here whether the rest of you went or not. I jolly well think I shall. Obey the High King, your Majesty, said Trumpkin, and let's be off. If I'm not to be allowed to sleep, I'll just soon march as stand here talking. And so at last they got on the move. Lucy went first, biting her lip and trying not to say all the things she thought of saying to Susan, but she forgot them when she fixed her eyes on Aslan. He turned and walked at a slow pace about 30 yards ahead of them. The others had only Lucy's directions to guide them, for Aslan was not only invisible to them, but silent as well. His big cat-like paws made no noise on the grass. He led them to the right of the dancing trees. Whether they were still dancing, nobody knew, for Lucy had her eyes on the lion, and the rest had their eyes on Lucy. And nearer the edge of the gorge, cobbles and kettle drums, thought Trumpkin. I hope this madness isn't going to end in a moonlight climb and broken necks. For a long way, Aslan went along the top of the precipices. Then they came to a place where some little trees grew right on the edge. He turned and disappeared among them. Lucy held her breath, for it looked as if he had plunged over the cliff, but she was too busy keeping him in sight and stop and think about this. She quickened her pace and was soon among the trees herself. Looking down, she could see a steep and narrow path going slantwise down into the gorge between rocks, and Aslan descending it. He turned and looked at her with his happy eyes. Lucy clapped her hands and began to scramble down after him. From behind her, she heard the voices of the others shouting, Hi, Lucy, look out for goodness sake. You're right on the edge of the gorge, come back. And then a moment later, Edmund's voice saying, No, she's right, there is a way down. Halfway down the path, Edmund caught up with her. Look, he said in great excitement, look, what's that shadow crawling down in front of us? It's his shadow, said Lucy. I do believe you're right, Lou, said Edmund. I can't think how I didn't see it before, but where is he? With his shadow, of course. Can't you see him? Well, I almost thought I did for a moment. It's such a rum light. Get on, Edmund, get on, said Trumpkin's voice from behind and above, and then, farther behind and still nearly at the top, Peter's voice saying, Oh, buck up, Susan, give me your hand. What a baby you could get. Why, a baby could get down here, and do stop grousing. In a few minutes they were at the bottom, and the roaring of water filled their ears. Sorry, we're having some technical difficulties right now with the puppy that is refusing to follow instructions. In a few minutes they were at the bottom, and the roaring of water filled their ears. Treading delicately like a cat, Aslan stepped from stone to stone across the stream. In the middle he stopped, bent down to drink, and as he raised his shaggy head, dripping from the water, he turned to face them again. This time Edmund saw him. Oh, Aslan, he cried, darting forward, but the lion whisked round and began padding up the slope on the far side of the rush. Peter, Peter, cried Edmund, did you see? I saw something, said Peter, but it's so tricky in this moonlight. On we go, though, and 3 cheers for Lucy. I don't feel half so tired now, either. Aslan, without hesitation, led them to their left, farther up the gorge. The whole journey was odd and dreamlike. The roaring stream, the wet gray grass, the glimmering cliffs which they were approaching, and always the glorious, silently pacing beast ahead. Everyone except Susan and the dwarf could see him now. Presently they came to another steep path up the face of the farther precipices. These were far higher than the ones they had just descended, and the journey up them was a long and tedious zigzag. Fortunately, the moon shone right above the gorge, so that neither side was in shadow. Lucy was nearly blown when the tail and hind legs of Aslan disappeared over the top. But with one last effort, she scrambled after him and came out, rather shaggy-legged and breathless, on the hill they had been trying to reach ever since they left Glasswater. The long, gentle slope, heather and grass, and a few very big rocks that shone white in the moonlight, stretched up to where it vanished in a glimmer of trees about half a mile away. She knew it. It was the hill of the stone table. With a jingling of mail, the others climbed up behind her. Aslan glided on before them, and they walked after him. Lucy, said Susan in a very small voice. Yes, said Lucy. I see him now. I'm sorry. That's all right. But I've been far worse than you know. Far worse than you know. I really believed it was him. I mean, yesterday, when he warned us not to go down to the fir wood, and I really believed it was him tonight when you woke us up. I mean, deep down inside. Or I could have if I'd let myself, but I just wanted to get out of the woods and I don't know. And whatever am I going to say to him? Perhaps you won't need to say much, suggested Lucy. Soon they reached the trees, and through them the children could see the great mound, Aslan's How, which had been raised over the table since their days. Okay, JJ, I need you to, you're not going to be able to work out there. Sorry, I lost my place. Our side don't keep very good watch, muttered Trumpkin. We ought to have been challenged before now. Hush, said the other four, for now Aslan had stopped and turned and stood facing them, looking so majestic that they felt as glad as anyone can who feels afraid, and as afraid as anyone can who feels glad. The boys strode forward. Lucy made way for them. Susan and the dwarf shrank back. Oh, Aslan, said King Peter, dropping on one knee and raising the lion's heavy paw to his face. I'm so glad, and I'm so sorry. I've been leading them wrong ever since we started, and especially yesterday morning. My dear son, said Aslan. Then he turned and welcomed Edmund. Well done, were his words. Then, after an awful pause, The deep voice said, "Susan." Susan made no answer, but the others thought she was crying. "You have listened to your fears, child," said Aslan. "Come, let me breathe on you. Forget them. Are you brave again?" "A little, Aslan," said Susan. "And now," said Aslan in a much louder voice, with just a hint of roar in it, while his tail lashed his flanks. "And now, where is this little dwarf, this famous swordsman and archer, who doesn't believe in lions? Come here, son of earth, come here!" And the last word was no longer the hint of a roar, but almost the real thing. "Wraiths and wreckage," gasped Trumpkin in the ghost of a voice. The children, who knew Aslan well enough to see that he liked the dwarf very much, were not disturbed, but it was quite another thing for Trumpkin, who had never seen a lion before, let alone this lion. He did the only sensible thing he could have done, that is, instead of bolting, he tottered toward Aslan. Aslan pounced. Have you ever seen a very young kitten being carried in the mother's cat's mouth? It was like that. The dwarf hunched up in a little miserable ball hung from Aslan's mouth. The lion gave him one shake, and all his armor rattled like a tinker's pack. And then, hey presto, the dwarf flew up in the air. He was as safe as he had been in bed, though he did not feel so. As he came down, the huge velvety paws caught him as gently as a mother's arms and set him right way up, too, on the ground. "Son of Earth, shall we be friends?" asked Aslan. Yes," panted the dwarf, for it had not yet got its breath back. "No," said Aslan, "the moon is setting. Look behind you, there is the dawn beginning. We have no time to lose. You three, you sons of Adam and sons of Earth, hasten into the mound and deal with what you will find there." The dwarf was still speechless, and neither of the boys dared to ask if Aslan would follow them. All three drew their swords and saluted, then turned and jingled away into the dusk. Lucy noticed that there was no sign of weariness in their faces. Both the High King and King Edmund looked more like men than boys. The girls watched them out of sight, standing close beside Aslan. The light was changing. Low down in the east, Aravir, the morning star of Narnia, gleamed like a little moon. Aslan, who seemed larger than before, lifted his head, shook his mane, and roared. The sound, deep and throbbing, at first like an organ, began on a low note, rose and became louder, and then far louder again, till the earth and the air were shaking with it. It rose up from that hill and floated across all Narnia. Down in Miraz's camp, men woke, staring palely in one another's faces, and grasped their weapons. Down below that, in the great river, now at its coldest hour, the heads and shoulders of the nymphs and the great weedy bearded head of the river god rose from the water. Beyond it, in every field and wood, the alert ears of rabbits rose from their holes. The sleepy heads of birds came out from under wings. Owls hooted, vixens barked, hedgehogs grunted, the trees stirred. In towns and villages, mothers pressed babies close to their breasts. Staring with wild eyes, dogs whimpered, and men leapt up, groping for lights. Far away on the northern frontier, the mountain giants peered from the dark gateways of their castles. What Lucy and Susan saw was a dark something coming to them from almost every direction across the hills. It looked first like a black mist creeping on the ground, then like a stormy wave of a black sea rising higher and higher as it came on, and then, at last, like what it was, woods on the move. All the trees of the world appeared to be rushing toward Aslan, but as they drew nearer, they looked less like trees, and when the whole crowd, bowing and curtsying and waving thin arms to Aslan, were all around Lucy, She saw that it was a crowd of human shapes. Pale birch girls were tossing their heads. Willow women pushed back their hair from their brooding faces to gaze on Aslan. The queenly breeches stood still and adored him. Shaggy oak men, lean and melancholy elms, shock-headed hollies, dark themselves, but their wives all bright with berries, and gay rowans all bowed and rose again, shouting, Aslan, Aslan, in their various husky or creaking or wave-like voices. The crowd and the dance round Aslan, for it had become a dance once more, grew so thick and rapid that Lucy was confused. She never saw where certain other people came from who were soon capering about among the trees. One was a youth, dressed only in a fawn skin with vine leaves wreathed in his curly hair. His face would have been almost too pretty for a boy's if it had not looked so extremely wild. You felt, as Edmund said when he saw him a few days later, there's a chap who might do anything, absolutely anything. He seemed to have a great many names. Bromius, Bastrius, and the Ram were three of them. There were a lot of girls with him, as wild as he. There was even, unexpectedly, someone on a donkey. And everybody was laughing, and everybody was shouting, Ewan, Ewan, Ewy! It's a romp, Aslan, cried the youth, and apparently it was, but nearly everyone seemed to have a different idea as to what they were playing. It may have been Tig, but Lucy never discovered who was it. It was rather like Blind Man's Buff, but only everyone behaved as if they were blindfolded. It was not unlike Hunt the Slipper, but the slipper was never found. What made it more complicated was that the man on the donkey, who was old and enormously fat, began calling out at once, refreshments, time for refreshments, and falling off his donkey and being bundled onto it again by the others, while the donkey was under the impression that the whole thing was a circus and tried to give a display of walking on its hind legs. And all the time, there were more and more vine leaves everywhere, and soon not only leaves, but vines. They were climbing up everything. They were running up the legs of the tree people and circling round their necks. Lucy put up her hands to push back her hair and found she was pushing back vine branches. The donkey was a mass of them. His tail was completely entangled, and something dark was nodding between his ears. Lucy looked again and saw it was a bunch of grapes. After that, it was mostly grapes, overhead and underfoot and all around. Refreshments! Refreshments! Roared the old man. Everyone began eating, and whatever hothouses you people may have, you have never tasted such grapes. Really good grapes, firm and tight on the outside, but bursting into cool sweetness when you put them in your mouth, were one of the things the girls had never quite had enough of before. Here there were more than anyone could possibly want, and no table manners at all. One saw sticky and stained fingers everywhere, and though mouths were full, the laughter never ceased, nor the yodeling cries of Ewan, Ewan, oy, 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 till all of a sudden everyone felt at the same moment that the game, or whatever it was, and the feast ought to be over, and everyone flopped down breathless on the ground and turned their faces to Aslan to hear what he would say next. At that moment, the sun was just rising, and Lucy remembered something and whispered to Susan, I say, Sue, I know who they are. Who? The boy with the wild face is Bacchus, and the old one on the donkey is Silenus. Don't you remember Mr. Tumnus telling us about them long ago? Yes, of course, but I say, Lou, what? I wouldn't have felt safe with Bacchus and all his wild girls if we'd met them without Aslan. I should think not, said Lucy. 12. Sorcery and Sudden Vengeance. Meanwhile, Trumpkin and the other two boys arrived at the dark little stone archway which led into the inside of the mound, and two Sentinel badgers, the white patches on their cheeks were all Edmund could see of them, leapt up with bared teeth and asked them in snarling voices, "Who goes there?" "Trumpkin," said the dwarf, "bringing the High King of Narnia out of the far past." The badgers nosed at the boy's hands. At last, they said. "Give us a light, friends," said Trumpkin. The badgers found a torch just inside the arch, and Peter lit it and handed it to Trumpkin. "The DLF had better lead," he said. "We don't know our way around this place." Trumpkin took the torch and went ahead into the dark tunnel. It was a cold, black, musty place with an occasional bat fluttering in the torchlight and plenty of cobwebs. The boys, who had been mostly in the open air ever since that morning at the railway station, felt as if they were going into a trap or a prison. "I say, Peter," said Edmund, "look at these carvings on the walls. Don't they look old? And yet we're older than that. When we were last here, they hadn't even been made." "Yes," said Peter, "that makes one think." The dwarf went on ahead, and then turned to the right, and then to the left, and then down some steps, and then to the left again. Then at last they saw a light ahead, light from under a door, and now for the first time they heard voices, for they had come to the door of the central chamber. The voices inside were angry ones. Someone was talking so loudly that the approach of the boys and the dwarf had not been heard. "Don't like the sound of that," whispered Trumpkin to Peter. "Let's listen for a moment." All three stood perfectly still on the outside of the door. "You know well enough," said a voice. "That's the king," whispered Trumpkin. "Why the horn was not blown at sunrise this morning. Have you forgotten that Miraz fell upon us almost before Trumpkin had gone, and we were fighting for our lives for the space of 3 hours and more? I blew it when first I had the breathing space." "I'm not likely to forget it," came an angry voice, "when my dwarfs bore the brunt of the attack and 1 in 5 of them fell." "That's Nickabrick," whispered Trumpkin. "For shame, dwarf," came a thick voice. "Truffle hunters," said Trumpkin. "We all did as much as the dwarfs, and none more than the king." "Tell that tale your own way, for all I care," answered Nickabrick. "But whether it was that the horn was blown too late, or whether there was no magic in it, no help has come. You great clerk, you master magician, you know all. Are you still asking us to hang our hopes on Aslan and King Peter and all the rest?" "I must confess, I cannot deny it, that I am deeply disappointed in the results of the operation," came the answer. "That'll be Dr. Cornelius," said Trumpkin. "To speak plainly," said Nickabrick, "your wallet's empty, your eggs addled, your fish uncaught, your promises broken. Stand aside then and let others work. And that is why—" "The help will come," said Truffle Hunter. "I stand by Aslan. Have patience, like us beasts. The help will come. It may even now be at the door." "Pah!" snarled Nickabrick. "You badgers would have us wait till the sky falls, and we can all catch larks. I tell you we can't wait. Food is running short. We lose more than we can afford at every encounter. Our followers are slipping away." "And why?" asked Truffle Hunter. "I'll tell you why. Because it is noised among them that we have called on the kings of old, and the kings of old have not answered." The last words Trumpkin spoke before he went, and went most likely to his death, were, "If you must blow the horn, do not let the army know why you blow it, or what you hope from it." But that same evening everyone seemed to know. "You'd better have shoved your gray snout in a hornet's nest, Badger, than suggest that I am the blab," said Nickabrick. "Take it back, or—" "Oh, stop it, both of you," said King Caspian. "I want to know what it is that Nickabrick keeps on hinting we should do. But before that, I want to know who those 2 strangers are whom he has brought into our council, and who stands there with their ears open and their mouths shut." They are friends of mine, said Knickerbrick. And what better right have you yourself to be here than that you are a friend of Trumpkins and the Badgers? And what right has the old dotard in the black gown to be here except that he is your friend? Why am I to be the only one who can't bring in his friends? His Majesty is the king to whom you have sworn allegiance, said Truffle Hunter sternly. Court manners, sneered Knickerbrick, but in the whole we may talk plainly. You know, and he knows, that this Telemarine boy will be king of nowhere and nobody in a week unless we can help him out of a trap in which he sits. Perhaps, said Cornelius, your new friends would like to speak for themselves. You there, who and what are you? Worshipful Master Doctor, said a thin, whining voice. So please you, I'm only a poor old woman, I am, and very obliged to this his worshipful dwarfship for his friendship, I'm sure. His Majesty, bless his handsome face, has no need to be afraid of an old woman that's nearly doubled up with her rheumatics and hasn't 2 sticks to put under her kettle. I have some poor little skill, not like yours, Master Doctor, of course, in small spells and cantrips that I'd be glad to use against our enemies if it was agreeable to all concerned, for I hate 'em. Oh yes, no one hates 'em better than me. That's all most interesting and satisfactory, said Dr. Cornelius. I think I now know what you are, madam. Perhaps your other friend, Knickerbrick, would give you some account of himself. A dull gray voice at which Peter's flesh crept replied, I'm hunger, I'm thirst. Where I bite, I hold till I die, and even after death they must cut out my mouthful from my enemy's body and bury it with me. I can fast 100 years and not die. I can lie 100 nights on the ice and not freeze. I can drink a river of blood and not burst. Show me your enemies. And it is in the presence of these two that you wish to disclose your plan, said Caspian. Yes, said Knickerbrick, and by their help that I mean to execute it. There was a minute or two during which Trumpkin and the boys could hear Caspian and his 2 friends speaking in low voices but could not make out what they were saying. Then Caspian spoke aloud. Well, Knickerbrick, he said, we will hear your plan. JJ, I need you to say it correctly, please. I'll wait for you. Put Daniel's, yep, put it down. Okay. There was a pause so long that the boys began to wonder if Knickerbrick were ever going to begin. When he did, it was in a lower voice, as if he himself did not much like what he was saying. All said and done, he muttered. None of us knows the truth about the ancient days in Narnia. Trumpkin believed none of the stories. I was ready to put them to the trial. We tried first the horn, and it has failed. If there ever was a High King Peter, and a Queen Susan, and a King Edmund, and a Queen Lucy, then either they had not heard us, or they cannot come, or they are our enemies. Or they are on the way, put in Truffle Hunter. You can go on saying that till Miraz has fed us to his dogs. All I was saying, we have tried one link in the chain of old legends, and it has done us no good. Well, but when your sword breaks, you draw your dagger. The stories tell of other powers besides the ancient kings and queens. How if we could call them up? JJ, I really need you to sit still. You're distracting me while I'm trying to read. Okay, go up with mom. Go up with mom. Yeah. We're waiting. If you mean Aslan, said Truffle Hunter, it's all one calling on him and on the kings. They were his servants. If he will not send them, but I make no doubt he will, Is he more likely to come himself? No, you're right there, said Knickerbrick. Aslan and the kings go together. Either Aslan is dead, or he is not on our side. Or else something stronger than himself keeps him back. And if he did come, how do we know he'd be our friend? He was not always a good friend to dwarfs by all that's told, not even to all beasts. Ask the wolves. And anyway, he was in Narnia only once that I ever heard of, and he didn't stay long. You may drop Aslan out of the reckoning. I was thinking of someone else. There was no answer, and for a few minutes it was so still that Edmund could hear the wheezy and snuffling breath of the badger. Who do you mean? Said Caspian at last. I mean a power so much greater than Aslan's that it held Narnia spellbound for years and years, if the stories were true. The White Witch! Cried three voices all at once, and from the noise Peter guessed that three people had leapt to their feet. Yes, said Knickerbrick very slowly and distinctly, I mean the witch. Sit down again. Don't all take fright at a name as if you were children. We want power, and we want a power that will be on our side. As for power, do not the stories say that the witch defeated Aslan and bound him and killed him on that very stone which is over there just beyond the light? But they also say that he came to life again, said the badger sharply. Yes, they say, answered Knickerbrick, but you'll notice that we hear precious little about anything he did afterward. He just fades out of the story. How do you explain that? If he really came back to life, isn't it much more likely that he didn't, and that the stories say nothing more about him because there was nothing more to say? He established the kings and queens, said Caspian. A king who has just won a great battle can usually establish himself without the help of a performing lion, said Knickerbrick. There was a fierce growl, probably from Truffle Hunter. And anyway, Knickerbrick continued, what came of the kings and their reign? They faded too. But it's very different with the witch. They say she ruled for 100 years, 100 years of winter. There's power, if you like. There's something practical. But heaven and earth, said the king, haven't we always been told that she was the worst enemy of all? Wasn't she a tyrant 10 times worse than Miraz? Perhaps, said Knickerbrick in a cold voice. Perhaps she was for you humans, if there were any of you in those days. Perhaps she was for some of the beasts. She stamped out the beavers, I dare say. At least there are some of them. There are none of them in Narnia now. But she got on all right with us dwarves. I'm a dwarf, and I stand by my own people. We're not afraid of the witch. But you've joined with us, said Truffle Hunter. Yes, and a lot of good it has done my people so far, snapped Knickerbrick. Who is sent on all the dangerous raids? The dwarfs. Who goes short when the rations fail? The dwarfs. Who lies? All lies, said the badger. And so, said Knickerbrick, said Knickerbrick, whose voice now rose to a scream. If you can't help my people, I'll go to someone who can. Is this open treason, dwarf? Asked the king. Put that sword back in its sheath, Caspian, said Knickerbrick. Murder at council, eh? Is that your game? Don't be fool enough to try it. Do you think I'm afraid of you? There's 3 on my side and 3 on yours. Come on, then, snarled Truffle Hunter, but he was immediately interrupted. Stop! 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 Said Dr. Cornelius. You go on too fast. The witch is dead. All the stories agree on that. What does Knickerbrick mean by calling on the witch? That gray and terrible voice, which had spoken only once before, said, Oh, Is she? And then the shrill, whining voice began. Oh, bless his heart. His dear little majesty needn't mind about the white lady. That's what we call her, being dead. The worshipful master doctor is only making game of a poor old woman like me when he says that. Sweet master doctor, learned master doctor, who ever heard of a witch that really died? You can always get them back. Call her up, said the gray voice. We are all ready. Draw the circle. Prepare the blue fire. Above the steadily increasing growl of the badger and Cornelius' sharp "What?" rose the voice of King Caspian like thunder. So that is your plan, Nickabrick. Black sorcery and the calling up of an accursed ghost, and I see who your companions are, a hag and a werewolf. The next minute or so was very confused. There was an animal roaring, a clash of steel. The boys and Trumpkin rushed in. Peter had a glimpse of a horrible gray, gaunt creature, half man and half wolf, in the very act of leaping upon a boy about his own age. And Edmund saw a badger and a dwarf rolling on the floor in a sort of cat fight. Trumpkin found himself face to face with the hag. Her nose and chin stuck out like a pair of nutcrackers. Her dirty gray hair was flying about her face, and she had just got Dr. Cornelius by the throat. At one slash of Trumpkin's sword, her head rolled on the floor. Then the light was knocked over, and it was all swords, teeth, claws, fists, and boots for about 60 seconds. Then silence. Are you all right, Ed? I think so, panted Edmund. I've got that brute Nickabrick, but he's still alive. Weights and water bottles, came an angry voice. It's me you're sitting on. Get off! You're like a young elephant. Sorry, DLF, said Edmund. Is that better? Ow, no, bellowed Trumpkin. You're putting your boot in my mouth. Go away. Is King Caspian anywhere? Asked Peter. I'm here, said a rather faint voice. Something bit me. They all heard the noise of someone striking a match. It was Edmund. The little flame showed his face, looking pale and dirty. He blundered about for a little, found the candle. There they were no longer using the lamp, for they had run out of oil. Set it on the table and lit it. When the flame rose clear, several people scrambled to their feet. 6 faces blinked at one another in the candlelight. We don't seem to have any enemies left, said Peter. There's the hag, dead. He turned his eyes quickly away from her. And Nickabrick, dead too. And I suppose that thing is a werewolf. It's so long since I've seen one. Wolf's head and man's body. That means he was just turning from man into wolf at the moment he was killed. And you, I suppose, are King Caspian. Yes, said the other boy, but I've no idea who you are. It's the High King, King Peter, said Trumpkin. Your Majesty is very welcome, said Caspian. And so is your Majesty, said Peter. I haven't come to take your place, you know, but to put you into it. Your Majesty, said another voice at Peter's elbow. He turned and found himself face to face with the badger. Peter leaned forward, put his arms around the beast, and kissed the furry head. It wasn't a girlish thing for him to do because he was the High King. I'll just wait for you to put that down. Best of badgers, he said, you never doubted us all through. No credit to me, your Majesty, said Truffle Hunter. I'm a beast, and we don't change. I'm a badger, what's more, and we hold on. I am sorry for Nickabrick, said Caspian, though he hated me from the first moment he saw me. He had gone sour inside from long suffering and hating. If we had won quickly, he might have become a good dwarf in the days of peace. I don't know which of us killed him. I'm glad of that. You're bleeding, said Peter. Yes, I'm bitten, said Caspian. It was that wolf thing. Cleaning and bandaging the wound took a long time, and when it was done, Trumpkin said, Now, before everything else, we want some breakfast. But not here, said Peter. No, said Caspian with a shudder, and we must send someone to take away the bodies. Let the vermin be flung into a pit, said Peter, but the dwarf we will give to his people to be buried in their own fashion. They breakfasted at last in another of the dark cellars of Aslan's Howe. It was not such a breakfast as they would have chosen, for Caspian and Cornelius were thinking of venison pasties, and Peter and Edmund of buttered eggs and hot coffee. But what everyone got was a little bit of cold bear meat out of the boys' pockets, a lump of hard cheese, an onion, and a mug of water. But from the way they fell to, anyone would have supposed it was delicious. And tomorrow we're going to finish the story with the last 3 chapters, beginning with chapter 13, the High King in Command. And the first word is now. So I hope that you're enjoying the story. I hope that everything is good with you. We are going to quit now for the evening. There's no more chapters tonight. I apologize. Tell them about the picture. Yes, we did we've received one very, very special submission for the cover art from Rebecca. It's a sword and shield, and it is on the YouTube page. I'm going to put it on the Facebook page probably tonight. I think JJ's got a picture to show everybody. That is yesterday's picture. There you go. And here's Kimmy's picture from yesterday also. Oh, that's Kimmy's entry. Okay. So maybe we'll be able to use that also. Okay. So without further ado, I wish you all good evening and God bless you. And I hope everything goes very well. Okay. Okay, those 2 swords. I hope everything goes well. And everybody have a good night. And we will see you tomorrow with Heavy D storytelling. That's my Jedi mind trick, I guess. All right. Good night.